other than trying to spread positivity and awareness and, help other people that are in need, been through it, going through it. So grad school is really stressful, but it's super gratifying. So that's, not a whole lot. My husband is kind of in and out all the time. He's out of town working right now, has been for the past week and a half, and we have a week and a half left to go. So
So it must be sometimes a little bit difficult to have the house all to yourself. So how is it having your husband who's working outside of the country and you're there to navigate things at home?
it's difficult, definitely. Like, so, sometimes he's in the country, sometimes he's not in the country. In this case, he's in the country right now. Last week he was not. That was not the case. It is difficult because, like with our daughter, obviously I don't have that extra hand. We also are in the middle of moving into our forever home, so I'm kind of having to juggle all of that by myself as well. And so it's definitely a lot, and I will say that it takes a very specific human being. I don't know how I've learned to deal with it, but here we are. We've got a great life. We have a wonderful kid, and we make it work. We're happy, and it just we find a way to make it work. It's difficult. It is. It's straining. It's hard, but we make it work.
I know that the last time we spoke, it was more so about how you're presenting your family, right? In regards to your daughter and your husband, and him being the stepfather of your daughter, and that gives you a unique perspective. Because I'll
Right.
be very honest with you, Ashley, there's like a lot of people who are around me who, when they look at that kind of dynamic, they're like, that's not necessarily for me, but you're able to make it work. So, what are some of the ways that you can make it work to catch everyone up to speed?
I mean, honestly, like that's really a hard question because I feel like everybody's dynamic is different. I will tell you this. It takes a really specific person to take on that much. Like in my husband's case, he went from never even having a girlfriend a day in his life to taking on a high strung girl with PTSD, family trauma, anxiety, and also came with as a package deal with a child. Like, and he took all of that in and he was like, okay. And, I think it's just everyone's dynamic is going to be different. And I feel like it's how you navigate. I think communication is very important. I think that's very key. I think you and your spouse partner need to be on the same page. If you're going to allow that person be that sole secondary parent, I think that you need to give them grace and let them parent, trust them. You guys essentially have to parent together. I mean, yeah, he's not biologically her father, he is her father. And, like if he says no, then unless him and I can come to an agreement on it, then that's just it. Just like if I say no, unless we can come to an agreement on it, that's it. Like we're one combined force when it comes to parenting. And I think at the end of the day, that's the most important thing when it comes to specific dynamics like that. But like I said, it's a very sensitive thing and it's very different for everybody. So I really think that you got to fill each other out. I will say my husband did not meet her for the first like 4 or 5 months of us dating. And so it took a while before I even introduced them. And he's just been daddy ever since. So I think it's just really specific. You have to really kind of be at peace with yourself. And that I think is the number one thing. That was my biggest hiccup was being at peace with myself and who I was. And once I got there, that's when I was like, I could breathe, if that makes sense. So, but like, I mean, everyone's dynamic is different. So I really think my best advice is just make sure that you guys can communicate, make sure that it's something that is going to work for you because you never want to do that to a child and then throw them to the wayside. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I will agree with that because I know there's some people that setup, that family setup isn't for them. And that's perfectly fine because not everything is for everyone. And I
Mhm.
know for me, like I've dated most of the people I've dated have always been a number of years older than me. Some have had children, some haven't.
Mhm.
But for me, I know that I don't want children. But if I were to date someone and they came as a package deal and they had a child, I wouldn't mind, especially if the child is older, because that child would have their father. And even though I would eventually meet them, depending on how serious it gets, I
Mhm.
think women in general have done a good job at shielding their children from potential bad partners. Is that something you would agree with?
If you want me to be honest, I'm gonna have to say where I'm from, no. The people that we associate ourselves with that are in that specific position, they are more mature people, and so they get around that. But I can say that the amount of, unfortunately, women that I know outweighs the amount of good women, and I do know a lot of really bad women that use their children as pawns, and it's not fair. Some of them have some weight to work with. Some of them really are just being super vindictive. And to me, I'm like, you ask my opinion, I'm going to tell you all you're doing is hurting the child. And that's my thing. Like the people we run with, if they're in that dynamic, they co-parent very well together. And some people can say that's up for debate, and that could be a completely different conversation. But like I've got a really good friend that I've known since middle school, and she co-parents with her ex-husband and his new wife, and like her and her new husband are the godparents of their new child, and like they spend holidays together and all types of stuff. And some people would say that's excessive, but you know what? That's their dynamic. That works for them, and I think that's healthy. All their kids are growing up. They have a biological mom, they have a bonus mom, and like you can't ask for anything better. I mean, to me, it's just nothing irks me more than somebody that uses their child as a pawn, because you're not thinking about your children, you're thinking about you. And that's just where I draw the line.
And I think
But
that's a big issue. You're right. I think that's a big issue. Like when I look at here in Canada, there's
mhm,
always this debate regarding who has the authority to say what is right for the child. And I would argue most people are going to say the parents, right? And then you bring us to the dynamic where you have changes not only in the schools when it comes to um, what the teachers or the staff wants to
mhm,
let the parents know in regards to their child, but now we have certain debates about, let's say, for example, like the different genders, like what's
right,
allowable in the washroom, what's allowable in the change room, what's allowable all around. And I
right.
think one of the missing components in that is that people sometimes try to cut out the parents from the conversation, especially when it's very young children and what they are going to be exposed to and what they shouldn't be exposed to. What are your thoughts on that?
So I know here in the United States, like that's been a really huge thing that's been up for debate. Like that's caused a lot of controversy here because, you know, it's one of those things where what age is it appropriate for this type of stuff to be introduced to our children? You live your life however you want to. That's not up to me to decide or judge. It's up to me to support you and be your friend if, like you are somebody that does identify in that culture, or, like you understand where I'm going with that. But like me having an almost 10-year-old daughter, so I'm not sure if they're doing this in Canada, but one thing that's kind of sparked a lot of controversy and a lot of like chatter through the mom group, especially like in our communities, is they're starting to install urinals in the female bathrooms. And that scares a lot of parents. And me as a mother myself, I have to say that I can't say I'm not a little bit worried about that. And again, live your life how you want to, but at what age is it appropriate? At what age do you say, okay, this is okay? It's okay for you to know about this. Like, their cognitive receptors at this age are not even remotely close to binding to understand any of the information we would have to give them. And that's just kind of where my issue is we're throwing big world issues and big world things at children that haven't even hit 13 years old yet. You know what I mean? Like, kids that don't have those cognitive receptors to understand what's going on. And so, we're about to have a lot of kids asking a lot of questions, and that's going to be hard for a lot of people. And I live in the South. I live in a very progressive Republican state, and people are not nice about stuff like that. And I can only see it getting worse from here. And I always try to keep the peace, but I don't know how it is in Canada up there with y'all, but down here in the States, especially in the South, people are really not happy about it.
I think the middle ground is no longer in the middle. It's either too far left or too far right. It's not
Yeah, there's no
in the
gray area.
center.
There's no gray
Yeah.
area anymore. It's either black or white. Like, there's no gray area with that anymore at all. You're right.
Yeah. And I wonder what would happen if some people started to take a more fierce stance. Like, let's say, for example, you had one side say that, hey, we absolutely are for this. And then you have another side saying that we're absolutely against it. But there isn't the
Right.
people in the middle saying that, okay, what at least appears that way? What is the compromise? Because here in Canada, misgendering and things of that nature is now considered a hate crime. So you have a lot of people who are feeling gaslit by the situation because what
Right.
started off as maybe we want to raise awareness and we want understanding and as an acceptance. Some
Hmm.
people are starting to view that as you went from just want to be a part of everyone else and now you're telling people what to think, and there's a confusion that all we want is for children to be children and have a regular childhood, whatever the family decides that is. And if when you want to have adult conversations, because sexuality in a lot of ways is an adult conversation, let's wait until we're adults, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, some of it obviously has to be talked about, at certain ages with girls and with boys, because of maturity levels and changes with your body. Those are specific sexuality changes that have to be talked about. But like,